2 years ago, the Seattle Seahawks said goodbye to Pete Carroll, the face of the franchise, the architect of an era. Most teams don't survive a moment like that. They spiral, they panic, they fall into a messy rebuild. Seattle didn't. Under first-year head coach Mike Macdonald, they didn't just reload, they evolved. And now, just a couple of seasons later, they're a faster, smarter, more physical version of the Seahawks, one win away from ultimate glory. This is how Seattle pulled off the impossible. To start with, let's talk about the decision to fire Pete Carroll at the end of the 2023 NFL season. Carroll had coached in Seattle for 13 seasons, and his time with the franchise was undeniably a success, as the team qualified for the playoffs in 9 of those seasons. Carroll recorded 10 playoff wins in that time, as well as the first title in team history in Super Bowl 48, meaning he will always be remembered as a franchise legend. However, by the end of his tenure in Seattle, it appeared that things had gone stale in the Pacific Northwest. The team missed the playoffs in 2023, going 9-8, and looking like a far cry from those legendary Carroll-led teams in the mid-2010s. As a result, general manager John Schneider took the difficult and controversial decision to let Carroll go and begin a bold new era for 2024 and beyond. The man chosen for that task was former Ravens defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, who had done an impressive job in Baltimore, improving the team's defense from ranking 19th in points allowed to the very best unit in football in just 2 years. Seattle's front office gave him the head coaching job at Lumen Field as they looked to revive their own defense, which had slipped into the bottom 10 in both of Carroll's last 2 seasons. There was a real need for Seattle to find substantial improvement on defense, especially with the threat of Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan in the division, 2 of the game's very best offensive coaches. Macdonald recognized this himself, drafting defensive tackle Byron Murphy out of Texas with the team's first-round pick and beefing up the linebacker core by adding Tyrese Knight out of UTEP. The team also traded for linebacker Ernest Jones mid-season, sending Jerome Baker and a 4th-rounder to the Titans for his services. The defense definitely showed signs of improvement, ranking as the league's 11th best unit in scoring. And it's fair to say that the 2024 season was one of steady progress for the team as a whole, posting a 10-7 record and only narrowly missing out on the division title on a tiebreaker with the Rams. Going into 2025, Seahawks fans were starting to feel cautiously optimistic. But during the offseason, the team had some major personnel changes to the offense in particular that raised more than a few eyebrows. For one, the team traded away starting quarterback Geno Smith to the Raiders for a 3rd-round pick. Geno's redemption arc had been one of the big stories in Seattle over the previous 3 seasons, as he finally became a legitimate NFL starter, after years in the wilderness following his 2016 release by the Jets. Smith wasn't elite in Seattle, but he was clearly a solid starter, putting up 2 4,000-yard seasons with the team and having a passer rating of 95.9 during his time as a Seahawk, which was well above league average. But Macdonald and general manager John Schneider had other ideas and made the biggest quarterback free agency signing that offseason, bringing in Sam Darnold on a $100.5 million 3-year deal after he was allowed to walk by the Minnesota Vikings. Like Smith, Darnold had been cast aside by the Jets previously, but he'd had an impressive season in Minnesota in 2024, going 14-3 before a rough playoff loss to the LA Rams led to the Vikings moving on from him and putting their faith in their own first-round selection, JJ McCarthy. But the Seahawks knew something that the Vikings didn't, and entrusted Darnold with the keys to their own offense in 2025. Seattle were hoping they could not only recreate the regular season success that he'd had in Minnesota, but elevate his game to the next level and turn this team into a genuine contender. However, Darnold would have to do this without the presence of 2 of the team's top receivers from the previous season, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Metcalf was traded to the Steelers for a 2nd-round pick, whilst Lockett was released after 10 seasons with the franchise, in which he'd become the 2nd most productive receiver in franchise history with 8,594 yards. The team did bring in former Offensive Player of the Year Cooper Kupp in free agency to replace some of that production, but many were surprised by the decision to move on from the 2 players who had been so key to the team's offense in recent times. People questioned whether John Schneider had gone too far with these decisions, totally overhauling the offense of a 10-7 team, initiating a full rebuild for a roster that didn't seem far away from contending. Once again, Schneider and Macdonald were a step ahead of all of us, and once the 2025 season began, they demonstrated that in full. Simply put, these 2025 Seahawks are a much better and much more complete version of the team that was put out the year before. Honestly, it's one of the best teams in franchise history, even sparking comparisons with the legendary Legion of Boom teams that won a Super Bowl, should have won another, and were a perennial contender at the top of the NFC for years. These Seahawks really look that good. We'll start with the quarterback position, and how the decision to move on from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold turned out to be a significant upgrade. Darnold had another excellent season in 2025, putting up over 4,000 yards again, and throwing 25 touchdowns to 14 interceptions, with his passer rating of 99.1 ranking him above the likes of Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, and Patrick Mahomes, as he made Minnesota regret letting him go. Whilst the Vikings' new quarterback JJ McCarthy struggled during the season, Darnold thrived in Seattle under the tutelage of new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. Kubiak deserves a lot of credit for how he's built this offense, playing to Darnold's strengths, and frequently using play action and motion to scheme players open in this offense. However, he was also helped out by the phenomenal performances of Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who had a sensational breakout year and became the focal point of this offense. JSN had been impressive in 2024, putting up 1,130 yards on the year and overtaking both Metcalf and Lockett as the team's #1 receiver. Going into 2025, the release of those two men meant that Smith-Njigba was going to have to handle more of the load going forward. He definitely rose to the challenge this season, breaking Metcalf's franchise record for receiving yards in a season by just week 12, and finishing with 1,793 yards on the year, a total only bettered 7 times in the history of the league. Smith-Njigba is the presumptive offensive player of the year, and for good reason. No one in the league was as good as him all year, as he tormented defenses week in, week out, and formed a great partnership with Darnold that only improved as the year went on. Elsewhere in the offense, Cooper Kupp had a solid year, managing nearly 600 yards and transitioning into a new role as the second option after so many years as the main man in Los Angeles. Kupp took advantage of the space that JSN opened up when double-teamed, as did second-year tight end AJ Barner, who managed 6 touchdowns on the year, providing another threat in the passing game. Finally, we have to talk about the team's decision to trade 4th and 5th round picks to the New Orleans Saints for Rashid Shaheed. Shaheed is one of the league's fastest players, and a dynamic option for the team to have through the air. His presence alone strikes fear into defenses, as he's always just one play away from breaking a game open. And he's proven to be an asset to this team throughout the season. On the ground, Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet provided an excellent 1-2 punch where required, combining for 1,757 yards and 17 touchdowns between them. These two complement the passing game well, and once they establish the run, this opens up play action for Darnold and company, who are happy to punish defenses as a result. Everything is made easier on offense by the offensive line, in particular the performances of last year's first-round pick Gray Zabel. Zabel was the team's biggest addition on offense during the 2025 draft, and he's shown himself to be an excellent blocker in both the running and passing games, and another excellent pickup from John Schneider. As good as this offense is, though, the defense was somehow even better in 2025. The biggest upgrade in the offseason was the addition of DeMarcus Lawrence in free agency following 10 years with the Dallas Cowboys. Lawrence was signed on a 3-year, $32.5 million deal, and he's proved himself to be worth every penny, putting up 6 sacks and 11 tackles for loss. On the defensive line, it was another big season for Leonard Williams, who joined from the Giants back in 2023. Williams has become a real leader on this defense and deservedly earned the first All-Pro selection of his 11-year career in 2025, having recorded 7 sacks and 62 tackles on the year alongside Byron Murphy at defensive tackle. Aided in part by Williams' presence, Murphy had a much better second season in the league, managing 7 sacks himself and cementing himself as a key part of this defense. Another successful draft pick was this year's second-round selection, Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina. Aged just 21, Emanwari slotted straight into the secondary this year, forming a partnership at safety with Kobe Bryant, with cornerbacks Reek Woolen and All-Pro Devin Witherspoon making sure that the secondary more than pulled their weight. The team ranked 5th in interceptions on the year, highlighting an ability to flip the field where required and setting up the offense to succeed. In short, this was a team that was superb on both sides of the ball, ranking 3rd in points scored and 1st in points allowed. The first time the team has achieved the latter since the prime of the Legion of Boom in 2015. This led to the team finishing 14-3, claiming the NFC West title and the #1 seed in the conference, as John Schneider and Mike Macdonald's vision for a new-look Seahawks 2.0 had been realized well ahead of schedule. But really, they were just getting started. In the playoffs, the Seahawks enjoyed a well-earned first-round bye before facing off against their hated rivals, the San Francisco 49ers, in the divisional round. As we've said, part of the reason why the Seahawks appointed a defensive coach like Macdonald was to neutralize teams like Shanahan's San Francisco, and that night in Seattle, they did exactly that. In a blowout for the ages, the Seahawks demolished the 49ers 41-6, getting the better of their rivals in every phase of the game, with the tone being set on the opening kickoff. Rashid Shaheed showed exactly why the team traded for him with a blistering 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, giving the team a 7-point lead that they never looked like squandering. In that one, the defense bullied Brock Purdy and his team all night, recording 3 turnovers, 2 sacks, and limiting the Niners' offense to just 128 net passing yards on the day. The offense did their part, seeing out the game and playing safe, mistake-free football to earn themselves a place in the championship game against the LA Rams. Just 5 weeks earlier, the Seahawks had edged out the Rams 38-37 in overtime in the game of the year, and this one was every bit as good. The Rams marched into Lumen Field, led by the presumptive league MVP in Matthew Stafford and the league's highest scoring offense in 2025. But that night, they fell short to a fantastic performance by Sam Darnold, exorcising the demons, or indeed the ghosts, from his own playoff loss the year before. Darnold threw for 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 picks, ripping up one of the league's best teams and guiding the Seahawks back to their first Super Bowl in 11 years. Of course, so much of the team's success in this one went through JSN, who continues to light up the league and managed 10 catches for 153 yards and a touchdown that night, cementing his place as the league's best receiver right now. Both of these playoff wins came under very different circumstances, but it summed up just how well this rebuild has been put together in Seattle. This team can beat you in so many different ways, whether through an incredible offensive performance from one of the league's best passing attacks or through a suffocating, dominating defensive display. This Seahawks team have been an absolute nightmare to play against all year, and are now getting the flowers they deserve. This has been a masterclass over the last 2 seasons, as the team has carried out a rebuild that some didn't feel was necessary, but has been totally justified with an NFC Championship in the bag and a Lombardi Trophy in their sights. They go into that clash against the New England Patriots, who themselves have carried out a phenomenal rebuild, as 4.5-point favorites, looking good to bring a first title since 2014 back to the Emerald City. This team had been ignored by some all year, but you simply can't ignore them anymore after these last 2 playoff performances. With Mike Macdonald at the helm, this looks like a team set to dominate this league for years to come. Will they kick things off with a Super Bowl win in Santa Clara? Let us know what you think in the comments.